Welcome to the Educate a Girl podcast series. Educate a Girl has set the goal of providing 1,000 young women from 5 continents with scholarships in journalism and media training to strengthen women's voices in media and improve professional gender representation in the field. This series acts as an educational platform for students, professionals, and the recreational listener. Each podcast explores a topic in media and journalism featuring a special guest. Our speaker today is Kimothy Walker, an award-winning Canadian journalist. After a 25-year journalism career, doing everything from local news to foreign correspondent work with W5 in Africa, Walker left CTV in 2014. She then launched Ottawa Media Group to pursue documentary production, international development, and communications. We began by discussing some of the differences between print and broadcast journalism.
One of the things that I really like about broadcast, and specifically video, is what I call the puzzle pieces. I really enjoy the process of putting together sound and visuals and words in a compelling package. With print journalism, and I have not done a lot of print journalism, I've written some essays and things that have been published in magazines. It's about the power of the words. I mean, in broadcast, we write to the pictures. The pictures are the most powerful thing, and as you know, they can, look at what happened recently with the picture of a dead little boy. It changed the world. Pictures are very powerful. With print, you only have your words, so you have to be a gifted writer. I don't necessarily, actually, no, I'm pretty sure I am not a gifted print writer. I really have to struggle with it, and I write the way that my brain works. I don't write in an academic way. And I think that's from 25 years of writing for television, because I write for the ear. I write for pictures, and pictures are the center of everything that I do.
And so when you first started writing for pictures and for TV and working in that field, what were some of the challenges that you faced?
Well, those puzzle pieces were also problematic. When you get past about, I always think 3 years in television, it really takes you 3 years as a full-time daily television reporter to really kind of get the hang of it, because it is so complicated to put those puzzle pieces together. And so that was some of the challenge I had. And I remember I had a female mentor early on, and she kept saying to me, "But what are you trying to say?" Because I was trying to put these stories together in a way that made me sound really smart, right? But I wasn't speaking to the audience in a way that I would to friends or to a class. I was, almost like trying to make an academic argument with these pictures. And once I actually started to speak to the audience and involve them in the conversation, my stories came easier. In the beginning, I remember trying to put these puzzle pieces together and getting really frustrated because it wasn't flowing the way that I wanted it to. And that's really something that you learn over time, is how to do that and make your message compelling so that people want to watch right through to the end, which I just finished a 1-hour documentary, and that was that was a whole new lesson in puzzle pieces.
So one of the most important things to remember would be your audience. Remember your audience. Remember to keep it interesting for them.
It's the single most important thing, particularly when you're dealing with broadcast. And where I was with local news is the audience has a very close relationship with its anchors and its reporters. And that relationship with the viewer is exactly what you have to write to. And that's who you're speaking to. And you should never forget that, because if you break that bond, they know it. They really do. They don't feel connected to you if you're not speaking to them directly.
And you've had many different kind of roles working in TV as an anchor and a reporter and producer. So can you tell me a little bit about how those roles have varied?
And I did sports, which was terrible. One of the things, when I left CTV in March last year to go on and do our own productions, I used to joke with friends that how was I ever going to get another job, because people thought that I just read out loud for a living because I was an anchor, and they didn't know what I did. And what I actually did do was I ran the newsroom 2 days a week. I was the producer of the weekend newscast. It was highest rated weekend newscast in a generation or something like that. And I led the team. But people at home didn't see that. They saw that at 6 o'clock I was there telling them the news. So I had to really do some work essentially educating the public through social media and some other things about what I did. So I decided to go and do a very, very serious investigative documentary so that I could kind of validate for people that I had other skills and other skill sets, because producers are the brains of the operation. They really are. I mean, reporters and producers are the content anchors. Quite honestly, if you just take out the anchoring part, they are just presenting the news. But I've actually never known an anchor who doesn't have another role. Like, nobody just shows up, puts makeup on, and reads the news anymore. That was maybe in the 1960s, but they don't do that anymore. So it's the producing, the content, the writing, the researching that reporters do and producers do that really is very similar. The only difference is that reporters go on air and present their research and their findings, and producers supply it to either the anchors or the reporters.
So there's a lot more to it than people might think at face value when they're just watching the news. They're not seeing the full story, the full picture of everything that goes into it.
Well, when you think it takes an average workday, so 8 hours to produce 2 minutes of news if you're a reporter, all day long to work on your story and gather elements. So 8 hours of going around the city and interviewing people and talking to, the mayor and councilors, or being at a crime scene for 2 minutes. That's all the work that goes into a 2 minutes. Or you have an entire newsroom of people. You get up to 40 people producing a 1-hour newscast, and it airs from 6 to 7, and then you start all over again. So I think they know how much work goes into it, but I don't think that they realize how much actually doesn't make it to air. For every person we call and speak to, there's another person that we called and spoke to who either declined or who didn't really have any new information for the story. So there's a lot of stuff that doesn't get onto the show, and then we weed through everything that we think that audiences don't need to know about or isn't of interest to them, and we pick all those seeds and build stories around those. That's where news judgment is incredibly important and has to be taught and honed over years and years so that you can have a pretty educated guess as to what your audience wants to hear and learn about.
And so with all those responsibilities in mind, what kind of characteristics or traits should a good broadcast reporter or journalist have?
Without fail, you need to be curious. You cannot be a journalist of any kind if you are not a curious person. You need to be the kind of person that goes down the street. I used to say to some students when I would do lectures that I could walk out my front door and just walk around my neighborhood and find stories. Because students used to say to me, well, how do you find a story? And I thought, you're curious. You open your eyes, you look around, just walking the dogs up and down a street. I mean, I saw just this morning a small older man with a wagon, and he goes and collects the glass out of the recycle bins, people's wine bottles mostly. And he's very, very old. And I was looking out my window and I thought, there's a story. Like, why is this senior citizen in such state that he spends every single glass recycle day going up and down the streets of the glebe? There's a story. So curiosity fuels everything, and you need to be curious and then be the kind of person who is gregarious enough to actually go out and talk to people and find those stories. I haven't really met very many shy journalists.
And so I know that it might be hard to explain just talking about it, but can you tell me what kind of elements make a good visual story? How do you make a good story with pictures?
It is difficult to explain, but if you think about what you like to look at, again, in the walking around the neighborhood scenario, right? People will say to you, oh, it's a beautiful day. Now think about that for a second. It's a beautiful day. Why? Because it's colorful and it's vibrant and it's sunny. Sort of the same thing with what we call compelling video pieces for a story. compelling. So what does that mean? Compelling means your eye is drawn to it. You want to watch. Not necessarily because it's always pretty. It could be compelling video of refugees coming out of Syria. It could be, the most amazing harvest moon that everybody's sharing on Twitter, something that moves people. Boardrooms, council meetings, things where people are sitting and just talking around a table, not really compelling video. Things that move, things that are colorful, things that speak to the human condition. Those are the things that if you are a really good television reporter, that's where you start. The words come after that. If you find the very, very best video and you build your story around that, that's the power of television or anything on a screen. Television seems like such an archaic term now. Anything like that gets people noticing. I mean, that's really what it is, getting people to notice, because a lot of times we're a bit on autopilot.
I'd love to talk more about storytelling and what new broadcast journalists can keep in the back of their mind when they're trying to be good storytellers.
Good storytelling is, again, what we talked about, always being aware of the audience, speaking to the audience as if you know them, as if you can understand what they feel in terms of wanting to watch compelling videos. And if you keep in the back of your mind always with storytelling who you're speaking to. I wrote something recently that was in a Ottawa At Home magazine, and it was about my 18-year-old leaving home to go to St. FX. So I kept in mind that I was speaking to other parents and parents specifically who have gone through the same thing that I have had to, or to people who it's coming up and I'm kind of warning them about the crying and the begging not to leave, those kinds of things. So I always kept in mind who I was talking to, because I wrote it far differently than I would write something that was an investigative piece for W5. The noticing things, being curious, looking around. I remember going to news conferences and just taking a few minutes to just look around at the characters, who's in the room, why are those people over on that side? Who do they represent? And just looking around and being aware, and then becoming a master of the puzzle pieces. You've got great audio here. You've got great visuals there. You have content that you really need to get across in a compelling way, and then putting all the puzzle pieces on the table and basically sitting back as a storyteller and thinking about how to maximize the impact. You're not just telling a story, I was walking down the street and I saw this and I saw that. Instead, you have to think about how to really grab the viewer and to go with the one puzzle piece that you think all the others will connect to. And that has to be the most compelling one.
Thank you for listening to the Educate a Girl podcast series. To learn more about Educate a Girl, visit our Facebook page.